Yon that lies the valley of unity. Those who are here will be pleased with whatever situation God places them in. Mundane matters make no difference to them, as they have achieved the pleased nafs. In the next stage, the pleasing nafs, one becomes a lantern to humanity, radiating energy to everyone who asks for it, teaching and illuminating like a true master. Sometimes such a person can also have healing powers. Wherever he goes, he will make a big difference in other people's lives. In everything he does and aspires to do, his main goal is to serve God through serving others. Finally, in the seventh stage, one attains the purified nafs and becomes insani kamil, a perfect human being. But nobody knows much about that state, and even if a few ever did, they wouldn't speak of it. The stages along the path are easy to summarize, difficult to experience. Adding to the obstacles that appear along the way is the fact that there is no guarantee of continuous progress. The route from the first to the last stage is by no means linear. There is always the danger of tumbling back into earlier stages, sometimes even from a superior stage all the way down to the first one. Given the many traps along the way, it is no wonder that in every century only a few people manage to reach the final stages. So when Shams asked me that question, it wasn't simply a comparison that he was after. He wanted me to consider how far I was willing to go to efface my personality in order to be absorbed in God. There was a second question hidden within his first question. How about you, great preacher? He was asking me. Of the 7 stages, which stage are you at, and do you think you have the heart to go further, till the very end? Tell me, how big is your cup? Kara. Kanya, December 18, 1244. Bemoaning my fate does me no good, I know. Yet I cannot help but wish that I were more knowledgeable in religion, history, and philosophy, and all the things Rumi and Shams must be talking about day and night. There are times I want to rebel against having been created a woman. When you are born a girl, you are taught how to cook and clean, wash dirty clothes, mend old socks, make butter and cheese, and feed babies. Some women are also taught the art of love and making themselves attractive to men. But that's about it. Nobody gives women books to open their eyes. In the first year of our marriage, I used to sneak into Rumi's library at every opportunity. I would sit there amid the books he loved so much, breathing in their dusty, moldy smells, wondering what mysteries they hid inside. I knew how much Rumi adored his books, most of which had been handed down to him by his late father, Baha al-Din. Of those, he was particularly fond of the Ma'arif. Many nights he would stay awake until dawn reading it, although I suspected he knew the whole text by heart. Even if they paid me sacks of gold, I would never exchange my father's books, Rumi used to say. Each of these books is a priceless legacy from my ancestors. I took them from my father, and I will pass them on to my sons. I learned the hard way just how much his books meant to him. Still in our first year of marriage, while I was alone at home one day, it occurred to me to dust the library. I took out all the books from the shelves and wiped their covers with a piece of velvet dabbed in rose water. The locals believe that there is a kind of juvenile jinn by the name of Kabikek who takes a twisted pleasure in destroying books. In order to ward him off, it is the custom to write a note of warning inside each book: "Stand thou still, Kabikek, stay away from this book." How was I to know that it wasn't only Kabikek who was supposed to stay away from my husband's books, but me as well? That afternoon I dusted and cleaned every book in the library. As I kept working, I read from Ghazali's vivification of the religious sciences. Only when I heard a dry, distant voice behind me did I realize how much time I had spent there. "Kara, what do you think you are doing here?" It was Rumi, or someone who resembled him. The voice was harsher in tone, sterner in expression. In all our 8 years of marriage, that was the only time he'd spoken to me like that. I am cleaning, I muttered, my voice weak. I wanted to make it a surprise. Rumi responded, I understand, but please do not touch my books again. In fact, I'd rather you did not enter this room at all. After that day I stayed away from the library even when there was no one at home. I understood and accepted that the world of books was not and never had been, nor ever would be, for me. But when Shams of Tabriz came to our house, and he and my husband locked themselves in the library for 40 days, I felt an old resentment boil up inside me. A wound that I didn't even know I had began to bleed. Kaimaya. Konya, December 20, 1244. Born to simple peasants in a valley by the Taurus Mountains, I was 12 the year Rumi adopted me. My real parents were people who worked hard and aged before their time. We lived in a small house, and my sister and I shared the same room with the ghosts of our dead siblings, 5 children all lost to simple diseases. I was the only one in the house who could see the ghosts. It frightened my sister and made my mother cry each time I mentioned what the little spirits were doing. I tried to explain, to no avail, that they didn't need to be frightened or worried, since none of my dead siblings looked scary or unhappy. This I could never make my family understand. One day a hermit passed by our village. Seeing how exhausted he was, my father invited him to spend the night in our house. That evening, as we all sat by the fireplace and grilled goat cheese, the hermit told us enchanting stories from faraway lands. While his voice droned on, I closed my eyes, traveling with him to the deserts of Arabia, Bedouin tents in North Africa, and a sea of the bluest water, called the Mediterranean. I found a seashell there on the beach, big and coiled, and put it in my pocket. I was planning to walk the beach from one end to the other, but a sharp, repulsive smell stopped me midway. When I opened my eyes, I found myself lying on the floor with everyone in the house around me, looking worried. My mother was holding my head with one hand, and in her other hand was half an onion, which she was forcing me to smell. She is back. My sister clapped her hands with glee. Thank God! My mother heaved a sigh. Then she turned to the hermit, explaining, ever since she was a little girl, Kaimaya has been having fainting spells. It happens all the time. In the morning the hermit thanked us for our hospitality and bade us farewell. Before he left, however, he said to my father, your daughter Kaimaya is an unusual child. She is very gifted. It would be a pity if such gifts went unappreciated. You should send her to a school. What would a girl need an education for? My mother exclaimed. Where did you hear such a thing? She should stay by my side and weave carpets until she gets married. She's a talented carpet weaver, you know. But the hermit didn't waver. Well, she could make an even better scholar someday. Obviously, God has not disfavored your daughter for being a girl and has bestowed many gifts upon her. Do you claim to know better than God? He asked. If there are no schools available, send her to a scholar to receive the education she deserves. My mother shook her head. But I could see that my father was of a different mind. Knowing his love for education and knowledge, and his appreciation of my abilities, it didn't surprise me to hear him ask, we don't know of any scholars. Where am I going to find one? It was then that the hermit uttered the name that would change my life. He said, I know a wonderful scholar in Konya named Maulana Jalal ad-Din Rumi. He might be glad to teach a girl like Kaimaya. Take her to him. You won't regret it. When the hermit was gone, my mother threw her arms up. I am pregnant. Soon there will be another mouth to feed in this house. I need help. A girl doesn't need books. She needs to learn housework and child care. I would have much preferred it if my mother had opposed my going away for other reasons. Had she said she would miss me and couldn't bear to give me to another family, even if for a temporary period, I might have chosen to stay. But she said none of this. In any case, my father was convinced that the hermit had a point, and within a few days so was I. Shortly after, my father and I travelled to Konya. We waited for Rumi outside the madrasa where he taught. When he walked out, I was too embarrassed to look up at him. Instead I looked at his hands. His fingers were long, supple, and slender, more like an artisan's than a scholar's. My father shoved me toward him. My daughter is very gifted. But I am a simple man, and so is my wife. We have been told you are the most learned man in the region. Would you be willing to teach her? Even without looking at his face, I could sense that Rumi wasn't surprised. He must have been used to such requests. While he and my father engaged in a conversation, I walked toward the yard, where I saw several boys but no girls. But on the way back, I was pleasantly surprised when I spotted a young woman standing in a corner by herself, her round face still and white as if carved of marble. I waved at her. She looked stunned, but after a brief hesitation she returned my wave. "Hello, little girl, can you see me?" she asked. When I nodded, the woman broke into a smile, clapping her hands. "That's wonderful. No one else can." We walked back toward my father and Rumi. I thought they would stop talking when they noticed her, but she was right, they couldn't see her. "Come here, Kaimaya," said Rumi. "Your father informs me you love to study. Tell me, what is it in books that you like so much?" I swallowed hard, unable to answer, paralyzed. "Come on, sweetheart," my father said, sounding disappointed. I wanted to answer correctly, with a response that would make my father proud of me, except I didn't know what that was. In my anxiety the only sound that came out of my mouth was a desperate gasp. My father and I would have gone back to our village empty-handed had the young woman not intervened then. She held my hand and said, "Just tell the truth about yourself. It's going to be fine, I promise." Feeling better, I turned to Rumi and said, "I'd be honored to study the Quran with you, master. I'm not afraid of hard work." Rumi's face brightened up. "That's very good," he said, yet then he paused as if he had just remembered a nasty detail. "But you are a girl. Even if we study intensely and make good progress, you'll soon get married and have children. Years of education will be of no use." Now I didn't know what to say and felt disheartened, almost guilty. My father, too, seemed troubled, suddenly inspecting his shoes. Once again it was the young woman who came to my help. Tell him his wife always wanted to have a little girl and now she would be happy to see him educate one. Rumi laughed when I conveyed the message. "So I see you have visited my house and talked to my wife. But let me assure you, Kara doesn't get involved in my teaching responsibilities." Slowly, forlornly, the young woman shook her head and whispered in my ear, "Tell him you were not talking about Kara, his second wife. You were talking about Gafur, the mother of his 2 sons." "I was talking about Gafur," I said, pronouncing the name carefully. "The mother of your sons." Rumi's face turned pale. "Gafur is dead, my child," he said dryly. "But what do you know about my late wife? Is this a tasteless joke?" My father stepped in. "I'm sure she didn't mean ill, master. I can assure you Kaimaya is a serious child. She never disrespects her elders." I realized I had to tell the truth. "Your late wife is here. She is holding my hand and encouraging me to speak. She has dark brown almond eyes, pretty freckles, and she wears a long yellow robe. I paused as I noticed the young woman gesture to her slippers. She wants me to tell you about her slippers. They are made of bright orange silk and embroidered with small red flowers. They are very pretty. I brought her those slippers from Damascus, Rumi said, his eyes filling with tears. She loved them. Upon saying that, the scholar lapsed into silence, scratching his beard, his expression solemn and distant. But when he spoke again, his voice was gentle and friendly, without a trace of gloom. Now I understand why everyone thinks your daughter is gifted, Rumi said to my father. Let us go to my house. We can talk about her future over dinner. I'm sure she'll make an excellent student. Better than many boys. Rumi then turned to me and asked, will you tell this to Kafir? There is no need, master. She has heard you, I said. She says she needs to go now. But she is always watching you with love. Rumi smiled warmly. So did my father. There was now an easiness hanging in the air that hadn't been there before. At that moment, I knew my encounter with Rumi was going to have far-reaching consequences. I had never been close to my mother, but as if to compensate for her lack, God was giving me two fathers, my real father and my adopted father. That is how I arrived in Rumi's house 8 years ago, a timid child hungry for knowledge. Kara was loving and compassionate, more so than my own mother, and Rumi's sons were welcoming, especially his elder son, who in time became a big brother to me. In the end the hermit was right. As much as I missed my father and siblings, there hasn't been a single moment when I regretted coming to Konya and joining Rumi's family. I spent many happy days under this roof. That is, until Shams of Tabriz came. His presence changed everything. Ella. Northampton, June 9, 2008. Being one who had never enjoyed solitude, Ella found she preferred it lately. Immersed in putting the final touches to her editorial report on sweet blasphemy, she had asked Michelle for another week to turn it in. She could have finished earlier, but she did not want to. The task gave her an excuse to retreat into her mind and shun family duties and long-awaited marital confrontations. This week, for the first time, she skipped the Fusion Cooking Club, unwilling to cook and chat with 15 women who had similar lives at a time when she wasn't sure what to do with hers. She called in sick at the last minute. Ella treated her communication with Aziz as a secret, of which suddenly she had way too many. Aziz didn't know she was not only reading his novel but also writing a report on it. The literary agency didn't know she was secretly flirting with the author of the book she was assigned to report on, and her children and husband did not know anything regarding what the novel was about, the author, or the flirtation. In the span of a few weeks, she had converted from a woman whose life was as transparent as the skin of a newborn baby into a woman wallowing in secrets and lies. What surprised her even more than this change was seeing that it did not disturb her in the least. It was as if she were waiting, confidently and patiently, for something momentous to happen. This irrational expectation was part of the charm of her new mood, for despite all the secrets, charming it was. By this time emails weren't enough. It was Ella who first called Aziz. Now, despite the 5-hour time difference, they talked on the phone almost every day. Aziz had told her that her voice was soft and fragile. When she laughed, her laughter came in ripples, punctuated by short gasps, as if she weren't sure how much more to laugh. It was the laughter of a woman who had never learned not to pay too much attention to the judgments of others. Just go with the flow, he said. Let go. But the flow around her was unsteady and disruptive as several things were happening in her house at this time. Avi had started taking private classes in mathematics, and Orly was now seeing a counselor for her eating disorder. This morning she had eaten half an omelette, her first substantial food in months, and though she had instantly inquired how many calories there were in it, it was a small miracle that she hadn't felt guilty and punished herself by throwing up afterward. Meanwhile Jeanette had set off a bombshell by announcing her breakup with Scott. She had offered no explanation other than the fact that they both needed space. Ella wondered if space was a code for a new love, given that neither Jeanette nor Scott had lost any time in finding someone new. The speed with which human relations materialized and dissipated amazed Ella more than ever, and yet she tried not to pass judgment on other people anymore. If there was one thing she had learned from her correspondence with Aziz, it was that the more she remained calm and composed, the more her children shared with her. Once she had stopped running after them, they had stopped running away from her. Somehow things were working more smoothly and closer to her liking than in the times when she had tirelessly tried to help and repair. And to think she was doing nothing to achieve this result, instead of seeing her role in the house as some sort of glue, the invisible yet central bond that held everyone together, she had become a silent spectator. She watched events unfold and days wafted by, not necessarily coldly or indifferently but with visible detachment. She had discovered that once she accepted that she didn't have to stress herself about things she had no control over, another self emerged from inside, one who was wiser, calmer, and far more sensible. The fifth element, she muttered to herself several times during the day. Just accept the void. It didn't take long for her husband to notice there was something strange about her, something so not Ella. Was this why all of a sudden he wanted to spend more time with her? He came home earlier these days, and Ella suspected he had not been seeing other women for a while. "Honey, are you all right?" David asked repeatedly. "I am right as rain," she answered, smiling back each time. It was as if her withdrawal into a calm, private space of her own stripped away the polite decorum behind which her marriage had slept undisturbed for many years. Now that the pretenses between them were gone, she could see their defects and mistakes in all their nakedness. She had stopped pretending. And she had a feeling David was about to do the same. Over breakfasts and dinners, they talked about the day's events in composed, adult voices, as though discussing the annual return on their stock investments. Then they remained silent, acknowledging the blunt fact that they didn't have much else to talk about. Not anymore. Sometimes she caught her husband looking at her intently, waiting for her to say something, almost anything. Ella sensed if she asked him about his affairs, he would gladly have come clean. But she wasn't sure she wanted to know. In the past she used to feign ignorance in order not to rock the boat of her marriage. Now, however, she stopped acting as if she didn't know what he'd been doing when he was away. She made it clear that she did know and that she was uninterested. It was precisely this new aloofness that scared her husband. Ella could understand him, because deep inside it scared her, too. A month ago, if David had taken even a tiny step to improve their marriage, she would have felt grateful. Any attempt on his part would have delighted her. Not anymore. Now she suspected that her life wasn't real enough. How had she arrived at this point? How had the fulfilled mother of three discovered her own despondency more important? If she was unhappy, as she once told Jeanette she was, why was she not doing the things unhappy people did all the time? No crying on the bathroom floor, no sobbing into the kitchen sink, no melancholic long walks away from the house, no throwing things at the walls, nothing. A strange calm had descended upon Ella. She felt more stable than she'd ever been, even as she was swiftly gliding away from the life she'd known. In the morning she looked into the mirror long and hard to see if there was a visible change in her face. Did she look younger, prettier, or perhaps more full of life? She couldn't see any difference. Nothing had changed, and yet nothing was the same anymore. Kara. Konya, May 5, 1245. Branches that once sagged under the weight of snow are now blossoming outside our window, and still Shams of Tabriz is with us. During this time I have watched my husband turn into a different man, every day drifting a bit further from me and his family. In the beginning I thought they would soon get bored with each other, but no such thing occurred. If anything, they have become more attached. When together, either they are strangely silent or they talk in an incessant murmur interspersed with peals of laughter, making me wonder why they never run out of words. After each conversation with Shams, Rumi walks around a transformed man, detached and absorbed, as if intoxicated by a substance I can neither taste nor see. The bond that unites them is a nest for two, where there is no room for a third person. They nod, smile, chuckle, or frown in the same way and at the same time, exchanging long, meaningful glances between words. Even their moods seem to depend on each other. Some days they are calmer than a lullaby, eating nothing, saying nothing, whereas other days they whirl around with such euphoria that they both resemble madmen. Either way, I cannot recognize my husband anymore. The man I have been married to for more than 8 years now, the man whose children I have raised as if they were my own and with whom I had a baby, has turned into a stranger. The only time I feel close to him is when he is in deep sleep. Many nights over the past weeks, I have lain awake listening to the rhythm of his breathing, feeling the soft whisper of his breath on my skin and the comfort of his heart beating in my ear, just to remind myself that he is still the man I married. I keep telling myself that this is a temporary stage. Shams will leave someday. He is a wandering dervish, after all. Rumi will stay here with me. He belongs to this town and to his students. I need do nothing except wait. But patience doesn't come easily, and it's getting harder with each passing day. When I feel too despondent, I try to recall the old days, especially the time when Rumi stood by me despite all odds. Kara is a Christian. Even if she converts to Islam, she'll never be one of us, people had gossiped when they first got wind of our impending marriage. A leading scholar of Islam should not marry a woman outside his faith. But Rumi took no notice of them. Neither then nor later on. For that reason I will always be grateful to him. Anatolia is made up of a mixture of religions, peoples, and cuisines. If we can eat the same food, sing the same sad songs, believe in the same superstitions, and dream the same dreams at night, why shouldn't we be able to live together? I have known Christian babies with Muslim names and Muslim babies fed by Christian milk mothers. Ours is an ever-liquid world where everything flows and mixes. If there is a frontier between Christianity and Islam, it has to be more flexible than scholars on both sides think it is. Because I am the wife of a famous scholar, people expect me to think highly of scholars, but the truth is, I don't. Scholars know a lot, that's for sure, but is too much knowledge any good when it comes to matters of faith? They always speak such big words that it is hard to follow what they are saying. Muslim scholars criticize Christianity for accepting the Trinity, and Christian scholars criticize Islam for seeing the Quran as a perfect book. They make it sound as if the two religions are a world apart. But if you ask me, when it comes to the basics, ordinary Christians and ordinary Muslims have more in common with each other than with their own scholars. They say that the hardest thing for a Muslim converting to Christianity is to accept the Trinity. And the hardest thing for a Christian converting to Islam is said to be letting go of the Trinity. In the Quran, Jesus says, "Surely I am a servant of God, He has given me the book and made me a prophet." Yet for me the idea that Jesus was not a son of God but a servant of God wasn't that hard to believe. What I found much harder to do was to abandon Mary. I haven't told this to anyone, not even to Rumi, but sometimes I yearn to see Mary's kind brown eyes. Her gaze always had a soothing effect on me. The truth is, ever since Shams of Tabriz came to our house, I have been so distressed and confused that I find myself longing for Mary more than ever. Like a fever running wild through my veins, my need to pray to Mary comes back with a force I can hardly control. At times like these, guilt consumes me, as if I am cheating on my new religion. Nobody knows this. Not even my neighbor Safiya, who is my confidant in all other matters. She wouldn't understand. I wish I could share it with my husband, but I cannot see how. He has been so detached, I am afraid of distancing him even more. Rumi used to be everything to me. Now he is a stranger. I never knew it was possible to live with someone under the same roof, sleep in the same bed, and still feel that he was not really there. Shams of Tabriz. Konya, June 12, 1245. Befuddled believer. If every Ramadan one fasts in the name of God and every Eid one sacrifices a sheep or a goat as an atonement for his sins, if all his life one strives to make the pilgrimage to Mecca and 5 times a day kneels on a prayer rug but at the same time has no room for love in his heart, what is the use of all this trouble? Faith is only a word if there is no love at its center, so flaccid and lifeless, vague and hollow, not anything you could truly feel. Do they think God resides in Mecca or Medina or in some local mosque somewhere? How can they imagine that God could be confined to limited space when he openly says, "Neither my heaven nor my earth embraces me, but the heart of my believing servant does embrace me"? Pity the fool who thinks the boundaries of his mortal mind are the boundaries of God the Almighty. Pity the ignorant who assume they can negotiate and settle debts with God. Do such people think God is a grocer who attempts to weigh our virtues and our wrongdoings on 2 separate scales? Is he a clerk meticulously writing down our sins in his accounting book so as to make us pay him back someday? Is this their notion of oneness? Neither a grocer nor a clerk. My God is a magnificent God. A living God. Why would I want a dead God alive? He is. His name is Al-Hayy, the ever-living. Why would I wallow in endless fears and anxieties, always restricted by prohibitions and limitations? Infinitely compassionate he is. The name is Al-Wajid. All praiseworthy he is. I praise him with all my words and deeds, as naturally and effortlessly as I breathe. The name is Al-Hamid. How can I ever spread gossip and slander if I know deep down in my heart that God hears and sees it all? His name is Al-Basir. Beautiful beyond all dreams and hopes. Al-Jamal, Al-Qayyum, Al-Rahman, Al-Rahim. Through famine and flood, dry and athirst, I will sing and dance for him till my knees buckle, my body collapses, and my heart stops pounding. I will smash my ego to smithereens, until I am no more than a particle of nothingness, the wayfarer of pure emptiness, the dust of the dust in his great architecture. Gratefully, joyously, and relentlessly, I commend his splendor and generosity. I thank him for all the things he has both given and denied me, for only he knows what is best for me. Recalling another rule on my list, I felt a fresh wave of happiness and hope. The human being has a unique place among God's creation. I breathed into him of my spirit, God says. Each and every one of us without exception is designed to be God's delegate on earth. Ask yourself, just how often do you behave like a delegate? If you ever do so, remember, it falls upon each of us to discover the divine spirit inside and live by it. Instead of losing themselves in the love of God and waging a war against their ego, religious zealots fight other people, generating wave after wave of fear. Looking at the whole universe with fear-tinted eyes, it is no wonder that they see a plethora of things to be afraid of. Wherever there is an earthquake, drought, or any other calamity, they take it as a sign of divine wrath, as if God does not openly say, "My compassion outweighs my wrath." Always resentful of somebody for this or that, they seem to expect God the Almighty to step in on their behalf and take their pitiful revenges. Their life is a state of uninterrupted bitterness and hostility, a discontentment so vast it follows them wherever they go, like a black cloud, darkening both their past and their future. There is such a thing in faith as not being able to see the forest for the trees. The totality of religion is far greater and deeper than the sum of its component parts. Individual rules need to be read in the light of the whole. And the whole is concealed in the essence. Instead of searching for the essence of the Quran and embracing it as a whole, however, the bigots single out a specific verse or two, giving priority to the divine commands that they deem to be in tune with their fearful minds. They keep reminding everyone that on the day of judgment all human beings will be forced to walk the bridge of Sirat, thinner than a hair, sharper than a razor. Unable to cross the bridge, the sinful will tumble into the pits of hell underneath, where they will suffer forever. Those who have led a virtuous life will make it to the other end of the bridge, where they will be rewarded with exotic fruits, sweet waters, and virgins. This, in a nutshell, is their notion of afterlife. So great is their obsession with horrors and rewards, flames and fruits, angels and demons, that in their itch to reach a future that will justify who they are today they forget about God. Don't they know one of the 40 rules? Hell is in the here and now. So is heaven. Quit worrying about hell or dreaming about heaven, as they are both present inside this very moment. Every time we fall in love, we ascend to heaven. Every time we hate, envy, or fight someone, we tumble straight into the fires of hell. This is what rule number 25 is about. Is there a worse hell than the torment a man suffers when he knows deep down in his conscience that he has done something wrong, awfully wrong? Ask that man. He will tell you what hell is. Is there a better paradise than the bliss that descends upon a man at those rare moments in life when the bolts of the universe fly open and he feels in possession of all the secrets of eternity and fully united with God? Ask that man. He will tell you what heaven is. Why worry so much about the aftermath, an imaginary future, when this very moment is the only time we can truly and fully experience both the presence and the absence of God in our lives, motivated by neither the fear of punishment in hell nor the desire to be rewarded in heaven? Sufis love God simply because they love Him, pure and easy, untainted and non-negotiable. Love is the reason. Love is the goal. And when you love God so much, when you love each and every one of His creations because of Him and thanks to Him, extraneous categories melt into thin air. From that point on, there can be no I anymore. All you amount to is a zero so big it covers your whole being. The other day Rumi and I were contemplating these issues when all of a sudden he closed his eyes and uttered the following lines. Not Christian or Jew or Muslim, not Hindu, Buddhist, Sufi or Zen. Not any religion or cultural system. I am not of the East, nor of the West. My place is placeless, a trace of the traceless. Rumi thinks he can never be a poet. But there is a poet in him. And a fabulous one. Now that poet is being revealed. Yes, Rumi is right. He is neither of the East nor of the West. He belongs in the kingdom of love. He belongs to the beloved. Ella. Northampton, June 12, 2008. By now Ella had finished reading Sweet Blasphemy and was putting the final touches on her editorial report. Although she was dying to discuss the details of his novel with Aziz, her sense of professionalism stopped her. It wouldn't be right. Not before she was done with the assignment. She hadn't even told Aziz that after reading his novel she had bought a copy of Rumi's poems and was now reading at least a few poems every night before going to sleep. She had so neatly separated her work on the novel from her exchange with the author. But on the 12th of June, something happened that blurred the line between the two forever. Up until that day, Ella had never seen a picture of Aziz. There being no photos of him on his website, she had no idea what he looked like. In the beginning she had enjoyed the mystery of writing to a man with no face. But over time her curiosity began to get the best of her, and the need to put a face to his messages tugged at her. He had never asked for a picture of her, which she found odd, really odd. So, out of the blue, she sent him a picture of herself. There she was, out on the porch with dear Spirit, wearing a skimpy cerulean dress that slightly revealed her curves. She was smiling in the picture, a half-pleased, half-troubled smile. Her fingers firmly grasped the dog's collar, as if trying to derive some strength from him. Above them the sky was a patchwork of greys and purples. It wasn't one of her best pictures, but there was something spiritual, almost otherworldly, in this one. Or so she hoped. Ella sent it as an email attachment and then simply waited. It was her way of asking Aziz to send her his photo. He did. When Ella saw the picture Aziz sent her, she thought it must have been taken somewhere in the Far East, not that she had ever been there. In the picture, Aziz was surrounded by more than a dozen dark-haired native children of every age. Dressed in a black shirt and black trousers, he had a lean build, a sharp nose, high cheekbones, and long, dark, wavy hair falling to his shoulders. His eyes were two emeralds brimming with energy and something else that Ella recognized as compassion. He wore a single earring and a necklace with an intricate shape that Ella couldn't make out. In the background was a silvery lake surrounded by tall grass, and in one corner loomed the shadow of something or someone that was outside the frame. As she inspected the man in the picture, taking in every detail, Ella had a feeling she recognized him from somewhere. As bizarre as it felt, she could swear she had seen him before. And suddenly she knew. Shams of Tabriz bore more than a passing resemblance to Aziz Zahara. He looked exactly the way Shams was described in the manuscript before he headed to Konya to meet Rumi. Ella wondered if Aziz had deliberately based his character's looks on himself. As a writer, he might have wanted to create his central character in his own image, just as God had created human beings in his image. As she considered this, another possibility arose. Could it be that the real Shams of Tabriz had looked just as he was described in the book, in which case it could only mean that there was a surprising resemblance between two men almost 800 years apart? Could it be that the resemblance was beyond the control and perhaps even the knowledge of the author? The more thought Ella put into this dilemma, the more strongly she suspected that Shams of Tabriz and Aziz Zahara could be connected in a way that went beyond a simple literary gimmick. The discovery had two unexpected impacts on Ella. First, she felt the need to go back to Sweet Blasphemy and read the novel again, with a different eye, not for the sake of the story this time but to find the author hidden in its central character, to find the Aziz and Shams of Tabriz. Second, she became more intrigued by Aziz's personality. Who was he? What was his story? In an earlier email, he had told her he was Scottish. But then why did he have an Eastern name Aziz? Was it his real name or was it his Sufi name? And by the way, what did it mean to be a Sufi? There was something else that occupied her mind, the very first, almost imperceptible signs of desire. It had been such a long time since she'd last felt it that it took her a few extra seconds to recognize the feeling. But it was there. Strong, prodding, and disobedient. She realized that she desired the man in the picture and wondered what it would be like to kiss him. The feeling was so unexpected and embarrassing that she quickly turned off her laptop, as though the man in the picture could otherwise suck her in. Bibars the Warrior. Konya, July 10, 1245. Bibars, my son, trust no one, my uncle says, because the world is getting more corrupt each day. He claims that the only time when things were different was during the Golden Age, when the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was duly in charge. Since his death everything has been going downhill. But if you ask me, any place where there are more than two people is bound to become a battleground. Even at the time of the Prophet, people had their share of hostilities, didn't they? War is the core of life. The lion eats the deer, and vultures reduce to bare bones what remains of the carcass. Nature is cruel. On land, in sea, or air, for every creature without exception, there is only one way to survive: to be shrewder and stronger than your worst enemy. To stay alive you need to fight. It's as simple as that. And fight we must. Even the most naive can see there is no other way in this day and age. Things took a nasty turn 5 years ago when 100 Mongol diplomats sent out by Genghis Khan to negotiate for peace were all slaughtered. After that, Genghis Khan turned into a fireball of fury, declaring war against Islam. How and why the diplomats were killed, nobody could say. Some people suspected that it was Genghis Khan himself who had his own diplomats killed, so that he could start this massive war campaign in the first place. It could be true. One never knows. But I do know that in 5 years the Mongols devastated the whole Khorasan area, causing destruction and death everywhere they galloped. And 2 years ago they defeated the Seljuk forces at Kozdag, turning the Sultan into a tribute-paying vassal. The only reason the Mongols didn't wipe us out is that it is more profitable for them to keep us under their yoke. Wars might be present since time immemorial, at least since Cain killed his brother Abel, but the Mongol army is like nothing we have seen before. Specialized in more ways than one, they use a vast array of weapons, each designed for a specific purpose. Every Mongol soldier is heavily armored, with a mace, an axe, a saber, and a spear. On top of that, they have arrows that can penetrate armor, set whole villages ablaze, poison their victims, or pierce the hardest bones in the human body. They even have whistling arrows, which they use to send signals from one battalion to another. With such well-developed warfare skills and no god to fear, the Mongols attack and annihilate every city, town, and village on their way. Even ancient cities like Bokhara have been turned into heaps of rubble. And it is not only the Mongols. We need to get Jerusalem back from the Crusaders, not to mention the pressure from the Byzantines and the rivalry between Shiites and Sunnis. When surrounded by cold-blooded enemies on all sides, how can we afford to be peaceful? This is why people like Rumi get on my nerves. I don't care how highly everyone thinks of him. For me he is a coward.